The weathered hand moved slowly
It's an
across
honor
the
to show you
leather-bound
around,
album
sir.
fingertips,
This
tracing
helicopter
the
has seen a
outline of a
lot of
photograph
action,
that had faded
but
with
it's still
time,
one of our
but
best.
not in memory. A UH-1 Huey helicopter, its olive-drab paint catching the desert sun, hovered above a landscape of sand and danger. The hand paused, trembling slightly over the faces of young men in flight suits, some smiling, some serious, all bound by something deeper than blood. In the background, an old radio crackled to life, its analog dial glowing softly in the dim light of the small living room. Special ceremonies at Fort Eagle Crest this weekend will mark the 75th anniversary of the Air Force, featuring a heritage flight of restored combat aircraft. The centerpiece will be the legendary Liberty Lady, a Vietnam-era Huey helicopter that served in multiple combat zones, including Desert Storm. The hand closed the album with deliberate gentleness. The radio continued its chatter, but the old man wasn't listening anymore. His pale blue eyes, still sharp despite the 7 decades they had witnessed, gazed out the window toward the distant mountains. "They don't understand her," he whispered, his voice low and gravelly, shaped by years of shouting over rotor blades and engine noise. "No one understands Liberty Lady like I do." The camera pans across a sun-drenched airfield where a gleaming UH-1 Huey helicopter sits silent and proud, surrounded by technicians in crisp uniforms. Their laptops and diagnostic equipment crowd around the machine like pilgrims at a shrine they don't truly comprehend. The morning sun casts long shadows across Main Street in Riverstone, Arizona, a town that time seemed to have granted a partial reprieve. American flags hung from nearly every porch and storefront, not for any particular holiday, but because that's just how Riverstone was. A place where patriotism wasn't political, but personal, etched into the town's DNA, like the sandstone formations that gave it its name. Samuel Sam Harrison stood in his driveway surveying his modest single-story home with the critical eye of a man who had spent his life ensuring that small imperfections didn't become catastrophic failures. At 73, his frame remained lean and wiry, his posture military straight, despite the slight stoop that age had imposed on his shoulders. His white hair was cut short, the same style he'd worn since 1969. The garage door was open, revealing his ongoing labor of love, a 1967 Chevrolet Impala, its midnight blue paint gleaming under the workshop lights. The engine compartment was open, tools laid out with surgical precision on a clean shop rag. "What do you think Rex think will get her purring today?" The aging German shepherd lying in the patch of shade by the workbench lifted his head, ears perking up at the sound of his name. Around his neck hung a set of dog tags, not his own, but a relic from another life, another war. Rex's muzzle had gone gray, but his eyes held the same unwavering loyalty they always had. Sam moved to his mailbox, collected the day's delivery, and shuffled through the usual assortment of bills and advertisements. He paused at an official-looking envelope bearing the Department of Defense seal. His weathered fingers opened it with care, unfolding the letter inside. Sergeant First Class Samuel G. Harrison Retweed, Technical Sergeant, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Dear Sergeant Harrison, it is my honor to personally invite you to the 75th anniversary celebration of the United States Air Force at Fort Eagle Crest on June 12th. As you may know, the celebration will feature a heritage flight of restored combat aircraft, including Liberty Lady, the UH-1 Huey you served with during Operation Desert Storm. Your contribution to military aviation and your specific experience with Liberty Lady would make your attendance particularly meaningful. I look forward to seeing you there. Respectfully, General Thomas Davidson, Commander, Western Air Defense Sector. Sam read the letter twice, his expression unchanging. Only the slight tightening of his jaw betrayed any emotion. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his shirt pocket, then walked to the glass-fronted cabinet in his living room. Inside, arranged with military precision, lay the physical markers of his service, the Silver Star, in its blue velvet case, the Bronze Star with V Device for Valor campaign medals from conflicts most Americans had forgotten. Beside them, in a simple wooden frame, a faded photograph of a younger Sam standing before Liberty Lady surrounded by his crew, their faces blurred by time and memory. He hadn't spoken of those days in years, not since Martha passed. She had been the only one who understood what those medals really meant. Not glory, but sacrifice. Pain, loss. Sam closed the cabinet and turned to Rex, who had followed him inside. "What do you say, old friend, one more mission?" The dog's tail thumped against the hardwood floor. Sam opened his closet and pulled out an old duffel bag. From the back of the closet, he retrieved his service uniform, still immaculately maintained, though he hadn't worn it in over a decade. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a worn leather pouch, its surface dark with age and used, the edges softened by thousands of touches. He ran his thumb over it, feeling the weight of memory it carried. "They won't know what to do with us, Rex," he said softly. "But that's been true for a long time now, hasn't it?" Fort Eagle Crest sprawled across the Arizona desert like a city unto itself, a monument to American military might. At the main gate, Sam sat patiently in his old Ford pickup, Rex sitting alert beside him. The young guard, barely older than Sam had been when he first enlisted, examined his identification with professional detachment. "Purpose of your visit, sir?" the guardian asked, his eyes flicking to Rex. "I'm here for the Air Force anniversary events. I received an invitation from General Davidson." Sam handed over the letter. The guard's eyes widened slightly as he read, "I'll need to call this in, sir, and we don't typically allow pets on base." "He's not a pet," Sam said, his voice gentle but firm. "He's retired military, same as me." The guard looked uncertain, then noticed the veteran's cap Sam wore with its combat patches and unit insignia. His expression softened. "Let me get my supervisor." Minutes later, a weathered master sergeant approached, his salt and pepper hair cut high and tight. He took one look at Sam's cap, noted the unit patches, and gave a respectful nod. "Vietnam, Desert Storm?" he asked. "Both," Sam replied. "And a few places in between that don't make the history books." The master sergeant smiled. "The dog can come in. Just keep him with you at all times. The hangar area is that way. Follow the signs for the Heritage Flight Line." As Sam drove through, the base memories flooded back. Different base, different time, but the rhythm of military life remained unchanged. Young men and women in uniform moved with purpose, their lives governed by schedules and chain of command. How long ago had he been one of them? He parked in the visitor area and clipped a leash to Rex's collar, though the dog had never needed one to stay close. Together they walked toward the flight line where a small crowd had gathered. Even from a distance, Sam recognized her. Liberty Lady sat gleaming in the morning sun, her olive drab paint restored to factory-fresh condition, the Red Cross on her side marking her as a medical evacuation variant. Someone had spent a great deal of time and money making her look like she'd just rolled off the assembly line. But something was wrong. The crowd around her wasn't admiring. It was concerned. Men in flight suits and technicians with clipboards moved with the urgent energy of a problem unresolved. Sam quickened his pace slightly. As he approached, he could hear the voices, professional but edged with frustration. "Run the diagnostic again. There has to be something we're missing." "We've run it 6 times, Chief. Every system checks out green." A young man, perhaps 28, stood at the center of the activity. His uniform was pressed to perfection, his posture screaming of ambition and education. The name tape on his chest read Martinez. Behind him, a slightly older officer, a first lieutenant named Blackwell, according to his uniform, paced with barely controlled agitation. "Martinez, we've got VIPs arriving in 2 hours and the demonstration flight is scheduled for 1400. General Davidson is going to have my ass if we can't get this bird in the air." "I understand, sir," Martinez replied, his voice tight. "But every diagnostic says she's perfect. Fuel system, electrical avionics. All green. She just won't start." Sam stood at the edge of the gathering, Rex a steady presence at his side. He said nothing, simply observed, his eyes moving over Liberty Lady with the focused attention of a man reading a familiar book. A young airman, his name tape reading Cooper, noticed Sam and Rex. Unlike the others whose focus remained on the helicopter and their equipment, Cooper approached Ollie with respectful curiosity. "Hello, sir," he said. "Are you here for the ceremony?" Sam nodded. "Something like that." Cooper's eyes moved to the veteran's cap Sam wore, noting the unit insignia. His expression changed from polite interest to something deeper. Did you fly Hueys, sir?" "Didn't fly them," Sam corrected gently. "Fixed them, kept them flying when they had every reason to fall out of the sky." Cooper looked back at Liberty Lady, then at the technicians with their computers and diagnostic tools. "They've been at it for hours," he said. "Everything checks out on the computers, but she won't start." "Computers?" Sam said the word carrying no judgment, merely observation. They're only as good as the information they have. Cooper's eyes widened slightly. You know this aircraft, sir? Sam's gaze remained on Liberty Lady. You could say that. Cooper hesitated, then made a decision. Would you like to take a closer look? I mean, I can't authorize anything, but I'd appreciate that, son. Cooper led Sam and Rex toward the helicopter moving around the perimeter of activity. Martinez looked up from his tablet, noticing them for the first time. Cooper, what are you doing? This is a restricted area. Cooper straightened. Sir, this gentleman is a veteran. He worked on Hueys during his service. Martinez's expression shifted from annoyance to condescension. We've got a dozen certified avionics specialists here, 3 master mechanics, and a direct line to the manufacturer's engineering department. We don't need a history lesson. Sam said nothing, his eyes still on Liberty Lady. Rex, sensing his master's focus, sat perfectly still beside him. Cooper flushed but stood his ground. Sir, he might have insights we don't. The vintage systems have all been mapped to our diagnostic software. Martinez cut in. Every circuit, every valve, every switch. The software says everything is functioning correctly. The issue is likely with the age of the airframe itself, not something we've missed. Lieutenant Blackwell, noticing the exchange, strode over. What's going on here, Martinez? Nothing, sir. Cooper brought over a visitor. I was just explaining that we have the situation under control. Blackwell turned his attention to Sam, taking in the veteran's cap, the weathered face, the quiet dignity of the old man's bearing. But Blackwell was young, ambitious, and currently staring at a career setback if the demonstration had to be canceled. His courtesy was professional rather than genuine. I appreciate your interest, sir, but this is a restricted area. We're dealing with some technical issues that require certified personnel. Sam met the young officer's gaze. General Davidson invited me. Blackwell's expression flickered. Surprise, then doubt. May I ask why? I served with Liberty Lady. I was her crew chief during Desert Storm. A subtle change rippled through those close enough to hear. Cooper's eyes widened with respect. Martinez's expression remained skeptical. Blackwell looked uncertain. Do you have some identification, sir, I can verify with the general's office? Sam reached into his pocket and produced the letter along with his military ID. Blackwell examined them, his expression softening slightly. I see. Well, Mr. Harrison, Sergeant Harrison, Sam corrected quietly. Blackwell flushed slightly. Sergeant Harrison, as you can see, we're having some technical difficulties with the aircraft. I'm sure you understand that these systems have evolved significantly since your time. Sam nodded once. Mind if I take a look? Before Blackwell could answer, Martinez interjected. Sir, we're on a very tight schedule. We don't have time for 5 minutes. Sam said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had commanded in life-or-death situations. Won't touch anything without permission. Blackwell hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes, Sergeant. Cooper, stay with him. Martinez rolled his eyes, but stepped wide, making a show of checking his watch. Sam approached Liberty Lady slowly, his movements deliberate. Rex stayed at his side, equally dignified. Cooper followed a step behind, watching with a growing interest as the old sergeant circled the helicopter. Sam's inspection wasn't rushed. He moved with the methodical precision of a man who had performed this ritual thousands of times. His eyes noted every detail, the way the rotor blades hung, the positioning of the control surfaces, the subtle signs that only experience could read. He paused at the engine compartment, his gaze lingering on a specific access panel, small, almost unnoticeable, against the larger components surrounding it. Has anyone checked this panel? He asked, pointing to it. Cooper looked where Sam indicated. I'm not sure, sir. Let me ask. He turned and called to Martinez. Chief, has anyone inspected this access panel? Martinez glanced over, irritation plain on his face. Every panel has been inspected. The computer runs a full system check. Sam's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but a deep, patient understanding. Mind if I take a closer look at this one? Martinez walked over, tablet in hand. This panel accesses a secondary fuel regulator. The diagnostic shows the fuel system is functioning perfectly. May I? Sam asked, gesturing to the panel. Martinez sighed. Look, sir, with all due respect to your service, we're not going to start randomly opening access panels based on intuition. We have protocols. Opening that requires breaking a factory seal and generating a mountain of paperwork for what the diagnostics clearly show is a non-issue. Sam nodded, accepting the refusal with dignity, but his eyes remained on the panel, seeing something the others couldn't. The world around Sam blurred, the sun-baked tarmac of Fort Eagle Crest fading. The air grew thick with the smell of sand, aviation fuel, and the metallic tang of fear. The steady desert sun of Arizona became the searing heat of Iraq 2003. He was no longer 73, but 31, his hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Liberty Lady shuddered around him, her frame vibrating with strain as she fought to stay airborne. Through the open door, he could see tracer fire arcing up from the ground below. In the cockpit, the pilot was shouting into the radio, his voice tight with controlled panic. The co-pilot slumped in his seat, blood seeping through his flight suit from a shoulder wound. "Engine 2 is losing pressure," the pilot shouted over the roar. "We're not going to make it back to base." Sam was already moving his body, operating on training and instinct. He grabbed his specialized toolkit, a worn leather pouch that had seen more combat than most soldiers. From it, he drew a custom-made wrench, its shape unlike any standard tool. "I need to get to the starboard engine access," he yelled to the door gunner, who nodded grimly, shifting his weapon to cover Sam's movement. Securing a safety line to his harness, Sam swung out onto the helicopter's bottom skid, the wind battering him with such force it felt like physical blows. Below, the Iraqi desert stretched endlessly, promising only a fiery death if he failed. With one hand gripping a handhold and his feet braced on the skid, he worked the access panel open. Inside was a fuel regulator system, and beside it a small bypass mechanism that didn't appear in any official manual. It was Sam's own design, created for exactly this scenario when standard systems failed under combat conditions. His fingers slick with sweat and oil adjusted the bypass valve. The modification would allow the engine to run on lower pressure, getting them home at the cost of future maintenance, a trade he'd make any day. The helicopter's shuddering eased as the bypass engaged. The engine note changed, steadying. Through the open door, Sam could see the pilot's expression shift from grim resignation to cautious hope. "Whatever you did, Chief, keep doing it," the pilot called back. "She's stabilizing." Sam secured the panel and pulled himself back inside, collapsing on the deck as Liberty Lady limped toward friendly territory, carrying her wounded crew and the injured soldiers they'd risked everything to extract. The memory faded, the sounds of rotors and gunfire giving way to the mundane bustle of the airfield. Sam blinked, finding himself still standing before Liberty Lady Martinez, watching him with thinly veiled impatience. "Sir, are you all right?" Cooper asked, concern in his young voice. Sam nodded. "Fine, son. Just remembering." From his pocket, Sam withdrew the worn leather pouch. The leather was dark with age and used the edges softened by decades of handling. The simple metal snap was polished smooth from thousands of openings. Martinez eyed the pouch with undisguised skepticism. "What's that? My tools?" Sam replied simply. He opened the pouch with practiced care, revealing an assortment of specialized implements, none of which would be found in a standard toolkit. Among them was the custom wrench, its unusual shape, the product of necessity and ingenuity. Martinez failed to suppress a smirk. "With all due respect, sir, we have state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment and precision tools calibrated to manufacturer specifications. I'm not sure what you think you're going to accomplish with," he gestured at the pouch, "those antiques." Sam didn't rise to the bait. His fingers closed around the custom wrench, its weight familiar in his palm. "This helicopter has a fuel bypass system that won't show up in your manuals." Martinez's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me. During Desert Storm, we had issues with the fuel regulators clogging with sand. I designed a manual bypass system. Installed it on several birds, including this one." "That's impossible," Martinez said, his voice hardening. "This aircraft has been completely restored to factory specifications. Any non-standard modifications would have been removed or documented." "Not this one," Sam said with quiet certainty. "It's behind that panel. Small valve, manually operated. Doesn't interface with any electronic systems. Your computers wouldn't know to look for it." By now, their conversation had drawn Lieutenant Blackwell back over. "What's going on here?" Martinez turned to his superior. "Sir, Mr. Harrison is suggesting there's some kind of custom modification to the fuel system that's not in the technical specifications." Sergeant, Sam corrected again, his voice remaining respectful but firm. Blackwell's patience was clearly wearing thin. Sergeant Harrison, while we appreciate your service and your historical knowledge, this aircraft has been fully restored and certified by qualified technicians. Every system has been inspected and verified. Yes, sir, Sam acknowledged. But with respect, you can't verify what you don't know to look for. A flash of irritation crossed Blackwell's face. Chief Martinez has run every possible diagnostic. The issue is not with the fuel system. Your diagnostics can only test what's in their database, Sam insisted gently. This modification never made it into any official documentation. It was a field adaptation developed under combat conditions. Martinez scoffed openly now. So you're saying you personally modified a military aircraft, didn't document it, and now what? 20 years later, this phantom modification is somehow preventing the engine from starting. 22 years, Sam corrected. And yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. The gathering had attracted more attention now. Several technicians had paused in their work to listen. Cooper stood by his expression, caught between admiration for Sam and concern about the escalating tension. Blackwell's patience finally snapped. That's enough. Sergeant Harrison, I appreciate your service and your concern, but we have protocols to follow. This is a military operation on a secure installation. Let me open that panel, Sam said, his voice still calm. 5 minutes. If I'm wrong, I'll leave without another word. Absolutely not, Martinez interjected. Breaking that seal requires authorization and documentation. We're not going to compromise the integrity of this restoration based on some war story. Sam's expression remained unchanged, but something in his eyes hardened slightly. Not anger, but disappointment. He'd seen this before, the arrogance of youth, the blind faith in technology, the dismissal of experience that couldn't be quantified or certified. Blackwell stepped closer to Sam, lowering his voice. Sergeant, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the flight line now. You can watch the demonstration from the viewing area, assuming we get this issue resolved. Son, Sam said quietly, that helicopter saved my life more times than I can count. I saved hers a few times too. All I'm asking is a chance to help her fly again. This isn't about sentiment, Blackwell said, his voice taking on an edge of condescension. This is about proper procedure and qualified personnel. Now I won't ask again. Please leave the flight line immediately. Sam stood his ground, not in defiance but in certainty. Rex sensed the tension moving closer to his master's side. Blackwell's face flushed with anger. He reached out, placing his hand firmly on Sam's shoulder, intending to physically turn the old man away from the aircraft. That's an order, old-timer. One more word, and I'll have you escorted to the base stockade for a full security review. Do you understand me? It was the final overstep, the irrevocable breach of respect. Sam didn't flinch from the touch, nor did his expression change. But Cooper, watching from a few feet away, saw something he would never forget. The quiet dignity of a man who had faced far worse than an angry lieutenant, and the deep sadness of someone witnessing the very values he had fought for being dismissed. In that moment, Cooper made a decision. Stepping away from the group, he pulled out his personal cell phone and scrolled to a contact he'd met during a briefing a month earlier, Major Ellis, General Davidson's executive officer. The call connected on the second ring. Major Ellis. Cooper turned away from the group, his voice low and urgent. Sir, this is Airman Cooper at the flight line. I'm sorry to call you directly, but there's a situation with Sergeant Harrison, the veteran General Davidson invited. What about him? The major asked, his tone immediately sharpening. Is he all right? He's fine physically, sir, but the situation here is not good. The chief and lieutenant in charge are treating him like he's senile. They're laughing at him, won't let him near the aircraft. They're relying entirely on their computers, and sir, I think Sergeant Harrison actually knows what's wrong with Liberty Lady. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then Cooper heard muffled shouting, the sound of a chair scraping back, and Major Ellis's voice now directed away from the phone. General, you need to hear this now. At the center of Fort Eagle Crest, in an air-conditioned command center, General Thomas Davidson, a man with 3 stars on his collar and a face carved from decades of command, took the phone from his aide. He listened for 10 seconds as Airman Cooper quickly relayed the scene of casual disrespect on the tarmac. The general's face, already stern, hardened into something terrible to behold. He didn't raise his voice when he finally spoke. He didn't need to. His words were cold, precise, and carried the weight of his entire career. Major Them, he said, his voice a low growl that made everyone in the room flinch. Get me Colonel Hayes on the line. Conference him with the tower at Eagle Crest now. He looked at his aide. And get me a car. I'm going down there myself. He muted his end of the call and turned to the assembled staff in the command center, his expression thunderous. For those of you who don't know, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, the man my officer-in-chief are currently humiliating on that flight line is Samuel Ghost Harrison. The name meant nothing to most of the younger staff, but several of the older officers straightened recognition and respect crossing their faces. During Desert Storm, the general continued, he kept 60% of the aviation battalion's helicopters in the air using scavenged parts, ingenuity, and sheer force of will. They didn't call him a crew chief. They called him Ghost because he could make dead birds fly again. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent room. Liberty Lady isn't just a Huey. It was his Huey. He was her crew chief for over 1,000 combat flight hours, including a mission that earned him a Silver Star when he landed in a hot LZ under fire to rescue a pinned-down reconnaissance team after both pilots were wounded. The general's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing in his temple. The reason that helicopter is so special, the reason it's the centerpiece of our heritage fleet, is because of a modification he personally engineered in a sand-soaked tent. A modification that is not in any manual. He turned toward the door, his voice dropping even lower. Now someone get me that car. Back on the sun-baked tarmac, the tension had reached its peak. Lieutenant Blackwell's hand remained on Sam's shoulder, his fingers digging in slightly. Sam still hadn't moved, his eyes fixed on Liberty Lady rather than the angry officer. I said, do you understand me? Blackwell repeated, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Before Sam could answer, the high-pitched squeal of tires cut through the air. 3 black command vehicles screeched to a halt on the tarmac just yards away, their doors flying open before they had fully stopped. From the lead vehicle emerged General Davidson himself, his face a mask of cold fury. Following him was the base commander, Colonel Hayes, whose face had gone pale with dread. The assembled technicians froze their mouths agape. Lieutenant Blackwell snatched his hand back from Sam's shoulder as if he'd been burned. His blood ran cold as he snapped to attention, a wave of nausea washing over him as he realized the magnitude of his error. General Davidson didn't run. He moved with a speed and purpose that was far more terrifying. He strode across the concrete, his eyes locked on Sam Harrison, ignoring everyone else as if they were nothing more than inanimate scenery. He bypassed the stunned lieutenant and the petrified chief technician, coming to a halt directly in front of the old man in the faded jacket. In the ringing silence, General Davidson, a 3-star general in command of the entire region, brought his heels together with an audible crack. He raised his hand to his brow and delivered the sharpest, most respectful salute of his long and decorated career. Sergeant Harrison, the general said, his voice booming across the tarmac, clear and strong for all to hear. It is an honor to have you on my base, sir. I apologize for the reception you have received. Sam simply nodded, a flicker of sad understanding in his pale blue eyes. He did not seem surprised or even particularly vindicated. He just seemed weary. Rex sat at perfect attention beside him, as if he too understood the gravity of the moment. The general dropped his salute but remained at attention. He turned his head slightly, his gaze sweeping over the dumbstruck crowd of technicians and falling with laser-like intensity on Lieutenant Blackwell and Chief Martinez. Let me make something perfectly clear to all of you, the general announced, his voice dropping to a lethally quiet register that nonetheless carried to every corner of the flight line. This man whom you have treated with such profound disrespect is a living legend of Army aviation. This is Samuel Ghost Harrison. He holds the Silver Star for valor, 2 Bronze Stars, and more combat flight hours as a crew chief than every single pilot on this base combined. He pointed a rigid finger at the silent helicopter. That aircraft, Liberty Lady, is not just a piece of equipment. It is a monument. During Desert Storm, during a sandstorm that grounded every other aircraft, Sergeant Harrison personally field-stripped and rebuilt her transmission in less than 12 hours to rescue a downed recon team. His voice grew even colder. In 2003, he redesigned the fuel flow regulators on this specific bird, a modification that is not and never will be in any of your manuals or your computers. A modification that allowed this Huey to fly higher and carry more weight than any other in the fleet. A modification that saved the lives of my entire platoon when he flew in to pull us off a hilltop we were about to be overrun on. The general's eyes bored into Blackwell. "I was a scared lieutenant then," he said softly, "and he was the calmest man I have ever seen." A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Jaws were slack. The technicians, who moments before had been snickering, now looked at Sam with a mixture of awe and deep burning shame. Martinez looked as though he might be sick. Lieutenant Blackwell's face had gone from pale to ashen. He was staring at the ground, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The old man wasn't just a forgotten veteran. He was a giant, and they had been trying to swat him like a flapdoam. The general turned his full attention back to Blackwell and Martinez. His voice was now barely a whisper, yet it was more terrifying than any shout. "Your arrogance, your blind faith in your technology, and your utter lack of humility and respect have disgraced your uniforms in this command." He stepped closer to the lieutenant. "You had the one man on this planet who knows this aircraft's every secret standing right here offering his help, and you threatened him." He stepped even closer. "You put your hand on him." It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. "General," a quiet voice interjected. It was Sam. He had stepped forward, placing a gentle, calming hand on the general's rigid forearm. "They're good men, just from a different time. They trust their screens. It's not their fault." His grace was more cutting than any reprimand. He was defending the very men who had humiliated him. In that moment, he wasn't just a hero from the past. He was a teacher offering a quiet lesson in wisdom and forgiveness. The general held his stare on Blackwell for a moment longer, then gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. He stepped back, ceding the stage. "She's all yours, Ghost." Sam walked to the side of Liberty Lady and finally unfastened the snap on his worn leather pouch. He didn't pull out a diagnostic tool or a complex meter. He retrieved a single, oddly shaped wrench. It was dark, forged from some unknown metal, and curved at an angle that matched no standard tool. As his fingers closed around it, the world flickered again. He was in a sweltering makeshift hangar at a forward operating base in Iraq, the air thick with the smell of canvas and hot metal. He was grinding this very piece of steel on a whetstone, shaping it by hand, checking its fit against a custom bolt he had machined himself. It was for his modification, the one no one else knew about, the key to the secret heart of the machine. The bolt controlled a manual bypass for the primary fuel injector, something he'd designed for emergencies, something no computer would ever know to look for. Back in the present, he reached for the small access panel that Martinez had dismissed. With the custom wrench, he turned the 4 bolts. They came loose with a smooth ease that no standard tool could have managed. He removed the plate, revealing a small, simple lever nestled within a tangle of wires. It was switched to the standard position. With the tip of the wrench, he gently nudged it to the bypass position. It clicked softly into place. Sam replaced the panel, tightening the bolts with a practiced touch. He then walked to the cockpit door and looked at the stunned technicians. "Someone want to try her now?" he asked, his voice calm and devoid of any hint of triumph. The crowd held its breath as Martinez, moving as if in a trance, stepped forward. The chief technician climbed into the pilot's seat, his hands shaking slightly as he went through the startup sequence, his fingers flying across the controls from muscle memory. But this time, when he hit the ignition switch, the result was different. There was a cough, a sputter, and then with a thunderous roar that shook the very air, the turbine engine of Liberty Lady screamed to life. The long, drooping rotor blades began to turn, slowly at first, then faster and faster, until they were a shimmering, invisible disc beating the air into submission with the familiar, life-affirming whump, whump, whump that was the heartbeat of a generation. The effect on the crowd was instantaneous. A spontaneous cheer erupted. Airman Cooper, the young man who had made the call, had tears in his eyes. The technicians were clapping, their earlier arrogance replaced by pure, unadulterated awe. Sam Harrison simply stood back, a small, sad smile on his face, watching the bird he loved come back to life. Rex sat beside him, tail sweeping the tarmac in steady, dignified approval. Some ghosts, it seemed, weren't ready to fade away just yet. The roar of Liberty Lady's engines echoed across the tarmac, a sound both ancient and alive. For most of the assembled technicians, It was merely the successful culmination of a troubleshooting exercise. For Sam Harrison, it was a voice from another life, a voice that spoke of dust storms and danger of brotherhood forged in the crucible of combat. The spinning rotors created a vortex of air that tugged at Sam's weathered jacket and ruffled Rex's fur. The German shepherd remained steady at his master's side, accustomed to the hurricane force of rotor wash from years past. Man and dog stood in perfect stillness as chaos swirled around them, their shared tranquility forming an eye in the storm of activity. Chief Martinez powered down the helicopter, his movements deliberate and precise. When he emerged from the cockpit, his face had undergone a transformation. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something approaching humility. He stood before Sam, his eyes unable to meet the older man's gaze. The assembled crowd fell silent, watching the tableau unfold. General Davidson stood a few paces back, his presence heavy with authority, but his intervention no longer necessary. This moment belonged to the men who had clashed over the soul of a machine. "I don't understand," Martinez finally said, his voice tight with conflicting emotions. "How could something so simple? Why wouldn't it be in the technical manuals?" Sam's weathered face creased in a gentle smile that held no victory, only understanding. "War doesn't wait for technical manuals, son. Sometimes you have to improvise with whatever you've got." Behind them, Liberty Lady's rotors slowed to a stop, the mighty blades coming to rest like the arms of a clock marking the passage of time. In their stillness lay a quieter power, the potential for flight, for rescue, for salvation. General Davidson stepped forward, placing a hand on Sam's shoulder. Not in the controlling grip Lieutenant Blackwell had employed, but with the respectful touch of a man acknowledging his equal. "Ghost, we've got a briefing in 30 minutes for the demonstration flight. I'd be honored if you'd join us." His eyes moved to Rex. "Both of you." Sam nodded, the gesture simple but laden with unspoken meaning. As the general turned to issue orders to his staff, Sam found himself alone with Martinez and Blackwell, the three men standing in the shadow of Liberty Lady. "Sergeant Harrison," Blackwell began, his voice stripped of all pretense. There's no excuse for how I treated you. I was wrong, completely wrong." Martinez nodded in agreement, his professional facade crumbling. "We were arrogant, blinded by our technology and credentials. I'm sorry, sir." Sam studied them, seeing not just their present contrition, but the men they could become if they learned the right lesson from this encounter. "You boys know how to fix helicopters," Sam said finally. "That's good, important. But the best mechanics I ever knew didn't just fix machines. They listened to them." He patted Liberty Lady's fuselage. "These old birds, they talk to you if you know how to listen." The wisdom hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. Before either man could respond, a commotion near the edge of the tarmac drew their attention. Airman Cooper was being escorted toward them by a senior NCO, the young man's expression caught between pride and apprehension. General Davidson intercepted them, exchanged a few words with the NCO, then gestured Cooper forward. "Airman Michael Cooper," the general announced loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Step forward." Cooper complied, his posture ramrod straight, eyes fixed ahead in perfect military bearing. "At ease, Airman," Davidson said. Then with a rare smile breaking through his stern countenance, he continued, "You made a difficult choice today. When you saw a veteran being disrespected, you took action through the chain of command. That took courage." Cooper's eyes flickered briefly to Sam, then back to the general. "Sir, I just did what seemed right." "Doing what's right, especially when it's uncomfortable, is the foundation of leadership," Davidson replied. "Remember that?" The general turned to address the gathered personnel. "The demonstration flight proceeds as scheduled. Chief Martinez, Lieutenant Blackwell, you'll work with Sergeant Harrison to prepare Liberty Lady. Consider it a learning opportunity few will ever have." With that, Davidson departed, leaving in his wake a reconfigured hierarchy where experience temporarily outranked insignia. The command center of Fort Eagle Crest hummed with activity as officers and technicians prepared for the afternoon's demonstration. Sam sat quietly in a corner, Rex at his feet, observing the controlled chaos with the detached interest of a man who had seen it all before. Across the room, Martinez and his team huddled over diagrams of Liberty Lady, occasionally casting glances in Sam's direction, no longer dismissive but curious, even reverential. Cooper approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to Sam with a respectful nod. "Black right," I figured. "Well, my grandfather was a Marine. Said real coffee doesn't need anything else. Sam accepted the cup with a grateful nod. Your grandfather was a wise man. Cooper hesitated, then sat in the empty chair beside Sam. Sir, if you don't mind me asking, they call you Ghost. How did you get that name? Sam took a sip of coffee, his eyes drifting to the middle distance as memory overlaid reality. Wasn't my idea, he said finally. Started in '91 during Desert Storm. We were at a forward operating base near the Iraqi border. Sandstorm came through, grounded everything. Had a Black Hawk down crew pinned by Republican Guard about 20 miles out. Sam's voice remained level, but his eyes had taken on a different quality, seeing not the command center but the swirling sands of another desert, another time. CO said nothing could fly in that storm, said we'd have to wait it out, but those boys on the ground, they didn't have that kind of time. Cooper leaned forward, entranced. Around them, others had paused in their work, drawn by the quiet gravity of Sam's voice. There was this old Huey, not Liberty Lady, another one. Been declared non-mission capable 2 days earlier. Engine issues. I'd been working on her in my spare time. Sam's weathered fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, the movement automatic, unconscious. I told the CO I could get her flying. He said it was impossible, the parts weren't available. The storm was too intense, no one could navigate in zero visibility. Said I'd be committing suicide. A small smile touched the corner of Sam's mouth. Told him I wasn't asking permission, was just letting him know where I'd be. The command center had gone completely silent now, all attention focused on the old sergeant and his tale. Spent 6 hours rebuilding that engine with whatever I could find. Used parts from a generator hose, clamps from the mess tent, even modified some components from an old Jeep. Sam's eyes refocused briefly on Cooper. You make do with what you've got. But the storm, Cooper prompted softly. Storm was still raging when I finished. Couldn't see 10 feet in any direction. But I knew those boys were out there, running out of ammo, running out of time. Sam took another sip of coffee. Found a young pilot, crazy kid named Rodriguez, told him I had a mission. He took one look at that Huey, one look at the storm, and just asked, when do we leave? The silence in the room deepened, everyone present understanding the magnitude of what was being described. We flew on instruments and dead reckoning. No GPS back then, not like you have now. Just a map, a compass, and gut instinct. Rodriguez kept her steady, while I worked the engine, keeping it together with spit and baling wire. Sam's voice dropped slightly. Found those boys by the tracer fire. 6 of them pinned down in a wadi, nearly out of ammunition. Republican Guard closing in from 3 sides. He fell silent for a moment. We got them out, all 6. Brought them home through that storm with the engine threatening to quit every minute. When we landed back at base, the CO was waiting. Said it was impossible, that bird was dead, the storm was a complete whiteout. Said we must be ghosts. Sam shrugged. Name stuck after that. Every time a helicopter was declared unflyable, they'd call for the ghost. Said I could raise the dead. The story hung in the air, its simple telling, belying the extraordinary courage it described. No one spoke, the silence a form of reverence. Finally, Cooper found his voice. And Liberty Lady, she was yours after that. Sam nodded. Signed to me in '94. Stayed with her through 3 more deployments, including the one where he trailed off his eyes, finding General Davidson across the room. The general met his gaze, a silent communication passing between them, the shared memory of a desperate extraction under fire of wounds and valor, and the thin line between life and death. Martinez approached his earlier arrogance, replaced by genuine respect. Sergeant Harrison, we're ready to begin the pre-flight checks whenever you are. Sam rose, setting his coffee aside. Let's go wake her up proper then. The technical briefing was unlike any Martinez had conducted before. Rather than standing at a digital display pointing to schematics and rattling off specifications, he found himself gathered with his team around Liberty Lady as Sam Harrison conducted a hands-on masterclass in helicopter maintenance. Standard maintenance focuses on what's broken. Sam explained, his hands moving over the aircraft with the familiarity of a parent touching a child. But the best mechanics prevent things from breaking in the first place. You learn to feel when something's not right long before any diagnostic can pick it up. He guided them through his inspection, routine techniques developed over decades of keeping aircraft flying in conditions their designers never imagined. He showed them how to listen to the subtle variations in engine tone, how to feel for vibrations that signaled impending problems, how to smell the difference between normal operation and imminent failure. For Martinez, whose entire career had been built on digital precision and standardized procedures, it was a revelation. His tablets and diagnostic tools remained unused as he absorbed a different kind of knowledge, organic, intuitive, born of experience, rather than algorithms. The bypass system, Martinez asked, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. How did you develop it? Sam knelt by the access panel he had opened earlier, beckoning the younger man to join him. Inside the compartment, the simple mechanical system stood in stark contrast to the sophisticated electronics surrounding it. Desert conditions played hell with the fuel regulators, Sam explained. Sand would get in no matter how good your filters were. Under normal operations, it wasn't a problem. Maintenance would clean them out during regular servicing. But in combat, he pointed to the bypass valve, its design elegantly simple. When the regulator starts to clog, fuel pressure builds up. This valve creates an alternate path, maintaining flow to the engine, even when the primary system is compromised. Bought us time, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours. In combat, that can be the difference between coming home or not coming home. Martinez studied the system professional appreciation, overcoming his earlier dismissal. This is brilliant engineering. Simple, redundant, effective. Why wasn't it ever incorporated into the official design? Sam's expression shifted slightly, a shadow of old frustration crossing his weathered features. Bureaucracy. By the time I submitted the design, the brass had already contracted for the next generation of helicopters. They weren't interested in modifications for airframes they were planning to phase out. He closed the access panel, his movements precise and practiced. So I kept installing it myself, on Liberty Lady and a few others. Saved lives. That was enough for me. The lesson continued around the helicopter. Each system examined, each modification explained. Sam's knowledge flowed freely without ego or reservation, a gift offered to a new generation of technicians who had never known the desperate innovation that combat necessitates. As the inspection neared completion, Lieutenant Blackwell approached. The young officer's demeanor had undergone a transformation in the hours since the general's intervention, the brittle arrogance replaced by a more thoughtful bearing. "Sergeant Harrison," he said, "the VIPs are arriving. General Davidson asked if you would join him to greet them." Sam nodded, wiping his hands on a shop rag. He turned to Martinez. "She's ready. You've got a good bird here, Chief. Treat her with respect. She'll never let you down." As Sam walked away, Rex following faithfully at his heel, Martinez called after him. "Sergeant, thank you for the lesson, for everything." Sam acknowledged the gratitude with a simple nod, continuing toward the reception area where the day's distinguished guests were gathering. The VIP reception area had been set up in a hangar adjacent to the flight line. The utilitarian space transformed by the addition of tables, chairs, and display boards, chronicling the history of military aviation. Distinguished guests moved through the exhibits, their conversations a low murmur beneath the high ceiling. Sam entered unobtrusively, Rex at his side. He felt out of place among the politicians and high-ranking officers in their dress uniforms, his own worn service cap and weathered jacket marking him as something other, neither civilian nor active duty, a living artifact of conflicts most preferred to forget. General Davidson spotted him immediately, breaking away from a conversation with a silver-haired senator to stride across the hangar floor. "Ghost," he said warmly, "there are some people I'd like you to meet." What followed was a procession of introductions. Senators, congressmen, military officials, each greeting Sam with the practiced cordiality of those accustomed to meeting constituents and subordinates. Few registered any real recognition of his name or accomplishments until Davidson provided context, at which point their perfunctory handshakes became more genuine, their gazes more attentive. Through it all, Sam remained quietly dignified, answering questions with unembellished honesty, deflecting praise with the ingrained modesty of a man who measured his worth by actions rather than accolades. A photographer approached, asking to take a picture of Sam with the general. As they posed, the camera's flash triggered another cascade of memory. The white burst of light became the muzzle flash of an AK-47, its report echoing across a rocky hillside in southern Iraq. Sam was back in the dust and danger of 2003 Liberty Lady's engines, screaming as she hovered in a tenuous landing zone, her skids barely finding purchase on the uneven terrain. In the cockpit, the pilot, a young warrant officer named Carson, fought to keep the helicopter stable as enemy fire raked the fuselage. The co-pilot slumped in his seat, blood seeping through his flight suit, where a round had found the gap in his body armor. Sam was in the crew compartment, returning fire with his M4 while simultaneously trying to assist the door gunner whose weapon had jammed. Behind them, 4 wounded Rangers lay on the deck, the medic working frantically to stabilize the most critical. "We're taking too much fire," Carson shouted over the intercom. "Can't hold this position." Through the open door, Sam could see more Rangers fighting their way toward the helicopter, burdened by 2 comrades they refused to leave behind. They wouldn't make it in time if Liberty Lady took off now. In that moment, as bullets pinged against the helicopter's frame and dust swirled in the rotor wash, Sam made a decision. "Hold position," he ordered, though it wasn't his place to give commands. "They're coming, 30 seconds. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. Grabbing a medical kit and slinging his rifle, Sam leapt from the helicopter into the maelstrom below. The rocky ground jarred his knees as he landed, but adrenaline pushed the pain aside as he sprinted toward the advancing Rangers. He reached them as they struggled up the slope, 2 men carrying a third whose leg had been nearly severed by an RPG blast. Without breaking stride, Sam took the wounded man's weight onto his own shoulders, freeing the exhausted Rangers to better defend their retreat. "Move," he shouted, already turning back toward Liberty Lady, whose blades continued to slice the air in defiance of the danger surrounding her. The next moments were a blur of motion and noise, the desperate dash back to the helicopter, the wounded Ranger, a dead weight across his shoulders, the sound of covering fire and the burn of superheated air as an RPG screamed overhead. They reached Liberty Lady as her fuel reserves dipped into the critical range. Sam heaved the wounded man into the crew compartment, then turned to help the others aboard. The last Ranger was just clearing the skid when a round caught him in the back, the impact throwing him forward into Sam. They tumbled together into the helicopter, the Ranger's blood hot and slick on Sam's hands as he dragged him clear of the door. Sam slammed his palm against the fuselage, twice the signal to take off, and Carson immediately pulled pitch-lifting Liberty Lady away from the lethal ground. As they climbed, Sam worked alongside the medic, fighting to keep the wounded Ranger alive. The man's eyes were wide with shock and pain, his lips moving in a prayer, or perhaps a message for someone he might never see again. "Stay with me, son." "Son," Sam said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We're going home. All of us." The helicopter banked sharply, throwing Sam against the bulkhead as Carson took evasive action against ground. Something hot and sharp tore through Sam's upper arm, a round that had penetrated the helicopter's bow skin, but he ignored it, focused entirely on the wounded man before him. It was only when they landed at the Forward Surgical Hospital, when the medical teams rushed aboard to take charge of the wounded, that someone noticed Sam's own injury. "You're hit, Chief," one of the Rangers said, pointing to the blood-soaked sleeve of Sam's flight suit. Sam looked down, surprised. "Just a scratch," he said, though the deepening stains suggested otherwise. Later, as a surgeon stitched the wound a clean through and through that had somehow missed bone and major vessels, a colonel appeared at the bedside. He was an imposing figure, his face etched with the lines of command responsibility. "You're Harrison," he said without preamble. "They call you Ghost." Sam nodded, wincing slightly, as the surgeon tied off another suture. "That was my nephew you carried out today." The colonel continued, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Lieutenant Davidson, the one with the leg wound." Sam said nothing uncomfortable with what he suspected was coming. "The surgeon says he'll keep the leg, might even walk again with time and PT." The colonel's hand came to rest on Sam's uninjured shoulder, the grip firm. "Thank you." The gratitude was genuine but unwelcome. Sam had done only what anyone would do, what had needed doing in the moment. He accepted the colonel's thanks with a nod, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, still recovering from his wound, Sam was summoned to headquarters. There, in a brief ceremony, he was awarded the Silver Star for his actions that day. The colonel, now he knew him as Davidson, pinned the medal himself. "The paperwork says conspicuous gallantry in action," Davidson had said afterward, when the official proceedings were complete. "What it doesn't say is that you saved the last of my family, my sister's only child." Sam had shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the medal seeming disproportionate to what he had done. "Just doing my job, sir." Davidson had studied him thoughtfully. No, Sergeant. Your job was to maintain that helicopter, not to run into enemy fire to save my nephew and his men. That was above and beyond. The memory faded, the camera flash receding into the gentler light of the hangar. General Davidson, the same man 20 years older, was looking at him with concern. You all right, Ghost? Sam nodded, blinking away the vivid recollection. Fine, sir. Just remembering. Davidson's expression softened with understanding. He alone among those present knew what memories might haunt the old sergeant had shared. Some of them carried his own. The demonstration flight is in 30 minutes, he said. Liberty Lady's going to fly again, thanks to you. Sam looked through the open hangar doors to where the helicopter waited on the tarmac, her blades catching the afternoon sun. She was always a good bird, he said softly. Just needed someone who understood her. Davidson nodded, then lowered his voice. I've been thinking about what happened today. The disconnect between your generation of maintainers and these young technicians with their computers. He paused, choosing his words carefully. There's knowledge being lost, Ghost. Experience that can't be programmed into a diagnostic system. Sam had thought the same thing many times over the years, watching as hands-on expertise was gradually replaced by digital interfaces that distanced technicians from the machines they maintained. I'm establishing a new program, Davidson continued. Working title is Generational Bridge, pairing experienced veterans like yourself with our younger maintenance crews. Not just as technical advisors, but as mentors, teaching them the things that can't be learned from a manual. The concept resonated with Sam, addressing a concern he had carried since retirement. The idea that all he had learned, not just the technical skills, but the intuition, the problem-solving under pressure, the improvisation that saved lives might die with him and others of his generation. Interested? Davidson asked. Before Sam could respond, a commotion near the hangar entrance drew their attention. A group of reporters had arrived, cameras and microphones in hand, guided by a harried public affairs officer. The press is here for the demonstration, Davidson explained. They caught wind of the Liberty Lady story and yours. He gave Sam an apologetic look. Mind answering a few questions? The Air Force could use some positive coverage, and this is a good news story if I've ever seen one. Sam's instinct was to decline. He had never sought publicity, had always been content to work in the background while others took credit. But something in Davidson's expression, a hint of the earnest lieutenant he had once been asking for help one more time, changed his mind. If you think it would help, he conceded. Davidson smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his stern features. It will, and afterward we'll talk more about that program. The press conference was mercifully brief, held on the tarmac with Liberty Lady as a backdrop. Sam stood uncomfortably at the center of attention, Rex a steadying presence beside him, as General Davidson recounted the morning's events in terms that made Sam's simple act of maintenance sound like a heroic intervention. The reporters asked predictable questions about Sam's service history, about the unique modification he had designed, about his feelings upon returning to the helicopter after so many years. He answered each with the same unvarnished honesty that characterized everything he did, neither embellishing nor diminishing the truth of his experience. A young female reporter raised her hand. Sergeant Harrison, what was going through your mind when the technicians dismissed your expertise? How did it feel to be vindicated? It was the sort of question designed to elicit an emotional response, to generate a quote about indignation or satisfaction. Sam considered it carefully before answering. Wasn't about being right, he said finally. Was about getting Liberty Lady flying again. These young technicians, they're good at what they do. They just haven't had the experiences I've had. He glanced toward Martinez and Blackwell, who stood at the edge of the gathering. Their expressions were attentive, perhaps a little chagrined, but no longer dismissive. In my day, we learned by doing, Sam continued, often by failing, then figuring out how not to fail again. These days, there's so much technology, so many safeguards. That's progress and it's good, but sometimes it creates a distance between the maintainer and the machine. He laid a hand on Liberty Lady's fuselage, the gesture unconsciously tender. These aircraft, they're not just assemblies of parts. They have personalities, quirks. You get to know them over time like you know a friend or he hesitated, almost said a spouse. But the comparisons seemed too personal to share, a partner. That knowledge doesn't fit in a manual or a diagnostic program. The reporter seemed satisfied with the response, jotting notes on her pad. Another hand rose. You're known as Ghost because of your ability to keep helicopters flying in impossible conditions. Do you think today's maintenance crews could do what you did if they were faced with similar challenges? The question carried an implicit criticism of the younger generation, an invitation to dismiss their capabilities in favor of old-school methods. Sam refused the bait. They'd find their own way, he said with conviction. Each generation faces its challenges with the tools and training that they have. We improvised because we had to, because lives depended on it. These young men and women, they're just as dedicated, just as capable. They'd rise to the occasion in their own way. It was perhaps the longest statement he had made to the press. The words hung in the air, resonating with an authenticity that no prepared statement could match. General Davidson stepped forward, sensing it was time to conclude. Liberty Lady will be performing in our Heritage Flight demonstration in 15 minutes. I invite you all to the viewing stands. Thank you for your time. As the reporters dispersed, Cooper approached Sam, his expression thoughtful. Did you mean that, sir, about our generation being capable? Sam studied the young airman, seeing in him something of his own younger self, the earnestness, the desire to prove his worth, the hunger to learn. Meant every word, Sam confirmed. You proved it today, didn't you? When you saw something wrong, you acted. That's what matters in the end. Cooper straightened slightly at the affirmation. I've been assigned as your liaison for the rest of your visit. Anything you need, just ask. Sam nodded his thanks, watching as the young man moved off to coordinate with the demonstration flight crew. Rex nudged his hand, a gentle reminder of the companion who had been with him through all the day's tumult. What do you think of old friend? Sam murmured, scratching the shepherd behind the ears. Think we might have something to offer these youngsters after all? Rex's tail swept across the tarmac in steady approval. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across Fort Eagle crest, final preparations for the Heritage Flight demonstration were underway. Liberty Lady sat at the center of the flight line, her systems fully checked and her fuel tanks topped off. Martinez approached Sam, who was standing a short distance away with Rex and Cooper. We're ready for pre-flight, Sergeant, the chief technician reported. Would you like to perform the final inspection? The offer was more than a courtesy. It was an acknowledgement, a restoration of respect that had been missing in their first encounter. Sam recognized it for what it was and nodded his acceptance. I'd be honored, Chief. Together they walked a slow circuit around Liberty Lady Sam, demonstrating his inspection routine one final time. His hands moved over the helicopter with practiced precision, checking connections, feeling for anomalies, listening to the whispers of metal and machinery that only experience could interpret. She's ready, Sam declared, finally his hand coming to rest on the helicopter's nose, it as if in benediction. Martinez hesitated, then extended his hand. Thank you, Sergeant, for the lesson, for your patience with us. Sam accepted the handshake, the simple gesture, sealing a peace between generations. Take care of her, he said, nodding toward Liberty Lady. She's got a lot of life left in her. The pilot and co-pilot approached both young officers with the eager look of aviators anticipating flight. They introduced themselves to Sam with genuine respect, having heard the story of his morning intervention. Any advice before we take her up, Sergeant? The pilot asked. Sam considered the question. She pulls a little to starboard in a hover. Nothing in the specs, just her personality. And the collective has a sweet spot at about 2/3 travel. You'll feel it when you hit it. The pilot nodded, absorbing the information not as a criticism of the aircraft, but as valuable insight from someone who knew her intimately. We'll treat her right, he promised. As the flight crew completed their pre-flight checks, Sam, Cooper, and Rex made their way to the VIP viewing area where General Davidson waited. The stands were filled with distinguished guests and base personnel, a buzz of anticipation running through the crowd. All set, Davidson asked as Sam took the seat reserved for him. She'll fly true, Sam affirmed. Good crew. The general nodded, his gaze moving to the flight line where Liberty Lady's crew was boarding. They tell me you're a man of few words, Ghost. But when you speak, people listen. That's a rare quality these days. Sam shrugged, uncomfortable with the observation. Just say what needs saying. Davidson smiled. Exactly my point, Derbal. A voice came over the public address system announcing the beginning of the Heritage flight demonstration. First to take off were modern aircraft sleek fighters and attack helicopters representing the current Air Force inventory. They roared overhead in precise formation, a display of contemporary air power that drew appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Then came the vintage aircraft restored warbirds from conflicts past their engines, producing distinctive sounds that triggered memories in the older veterans present. A P-51 Mustang from World War II, an F-86 Sabre from Korea, an F-4 Phantom from Vietnam, and finally Liberty Lady. Her turbine engine spooled up the sound building from a whine to a roar as the main rotor began to turn. Slowly at first, then faster, until the blades became a blur against the azure sky. She lifted off with graceful dignity, rising into the air as she had done countless times before in far more dangerous circumstances. As Liberty Lady took her place in the formation, flying alongside aircraft that spanned generations of American military aviation, Sam felt an unexpected tightness in his throat. Rex, sensing his master's emotion, pressed against his leg in silent support. The formation made a low pass over the viewing stands, Liberty Lady's distinctive silhouette unmistakable among the more modern aircraft. The crowd applauded, but for Sam, the moment transcended mere spectacle. In that helicopter were his memories of missions and men of fear and courage, of a time when his skills and determination had meant the difference between life and death. Liberty Lady carried not just her crew, but the weight of history, the echoes of battles fought and lives saved. And now, because of a simple act of mechanical intervention, because a young airman had made a call and a general had listened, that history would continue. Liberty Lady would fly on carrying her stories to new generations. Cooper leaned closer, his voice barely audible over the aircraft engines. "Sir, I wanted to thank you, not just for fixing Liberty Lady, but for showing us that there's more to maintenance than following procedures, that there's an art to it." Sam nodded, understanding the deeper significance of the young man's words. It wasn't just about helicopters or maintenance techniques. It was about connection to the machines, to the mission, to the legacy of those who had served before. As Liberty Lady completed her pass and banked away her olive-drab form, silhouetted against the deepening blue of the afternoon sky, Sam felt a sense of closure. Not an ending, but a transition. A passing of knowledge, of responsibility, of care from one generation to the next. The ghost had returned not to haunt, but to teach. And in that teaching lay a kind of immortality that no medal or commendation could confer. "She flies well," Sam said softly, as much to himself as to Cooper. "Always did." In those simple words lay a lifetime of service, of sacrifice, of quiet, determined excellence. And in the eyes of those who now watched him, General Davidson, Chief Martinez, Lieutenant Blackwell Airman Cooper, there was at last the recognition that had been missing for too long. The recognition that some heroes wear no insignia, seek no acclaim, and do extraordinary things simply because they must be done. Heroes like Samuel "Ghost" Harrison, who had lived a life of service in the shadows only to emerge into the light when Liberty Lady needed him one more time. The desert sunset painted Fort Eagle Crest in hues of amber and gold, the lengthening shadows stretching across the tarmac like fingers reaching for the distant horizon. Liberty Lady had completed her flight demonstration with flawless precision, her aging frame moving through the air with the grace of a dancer remembering steps from her prime. As the helicopter settled onto the tarmac, her rotor slowing to a stop, a spontaneous round of applause rose from the assembled crowd. For most, it was appreciation for a well-executed display of vintage aviation. For Sam Harrison, watching from the VIP viewing area with Rex at his feet, it was something far more personal, a validation not just of his morning's work, but of decades spent in service to machines that carried men into danger, and if he did his job right, brought them home again. General Davidson leaned over, his voice pitched just loud enough to carry over the diminishing applause. "She flew beautifully, Ghost. Just like the old days." Sam nodded, his weathered face revealing little of the emotion that surged beneath the surface. "She's a good bird," he replied simply. The understatement was characteristic of the man, few words carrying the weight of deep feeling. As the crowd began to disperse, moving toward the reception that would conclude the day's events, Davidson placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. The touch was light but meaningful, the gesture of a commander who understood the true value of the man beside him. "I meant what I said earlier about the Generational Bridge program," he said. Our young technicians have all the technical training in the world, but they're missing something essential, something you have in abundance. Sam glanced at the general, a question in his pale blue eyes. Experience, Davison clarified. Not just knowledge of how these machines work, but understanding of how they fail, how to keep them flying when everything says they should be grounded. He paused, his gaze shifting to Liberty Lady in the distance, how to improvise when lives depend on it. The proposition hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. Davison was offering more than recognition, he was offering purpose. A chance for Sam's hard-won wisdom to live on beyond his years, to be passed to a generation that had never known the desperate innovation that combat necessitates. Before Sam could respond, Cooper approached, his expression both respectful and hesitant. "Excuse me, General Sergeant Harrison. They're requesting your presence at the reception. The Secretary of the Air Force has arrived, and he's asked to meet you, sir." Davidson nodded. "We'll be right there, Airman." He turned back to Sam. "Think about it, Ghost. No pressure, no rush. But I believe you still have a lot to give." Sam watched as the general moved away, his straight-backed military bearing, unchanged by the years that had added silver to his hair and stars to his shoulders. The proposition settled into Sam's thoughts, neither embraced nor rejected, but present a seed planted in soil long fallow. Cooper remained, his youthful face a study in barely contained curiosity. "Sir, if you don't mind my asking, what was the general talking about? What program?" Sam considered the young airman, seeing in him the earnest eagerness that reminded him of himself at that age, before sand and blood, and the particular wisdom that comes only through surviving things that should have killed you. "He thinks I might have something to teach," Sam said finally, the admission carrying a hint of amusement. "To you young folks with your computers and diagnostics." Cooper's response was immediate and genuine. "You do, sir. What you did today, I've never seen anything like it. None of us had." The simple conviction in the young man's voice gave Sam pause. He had spent so many years assuming his skills were obsolete, his knowledge rendered irrelevant by technological advancement. The events of the day had challenged that assumption, suggesting there might still be value in the hard-earned instincts of an old crew chief. "We should join the others," Sam said, deflecting the moment of recognition. He whistled softly to Rex, who rose immediately, alert and ready. Together, the old sergeant, the young airman, and the faithful shepherd made their way toward the reception hangar. The reception was in full swing when they arrived, the hangar transformed into an elegant venue, with white-clothed tables, floral arrangements, and uniformed servers circulating with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne. Military personnel in dress uniforms mingled with civilian dignitaries in suits and cocktail dresses, the hum of conversation punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. Sam paused at the entrance, momentarily overwhelmed by the scene. His world had long been defined by the quiet routine of his small house in Riverstone, his garage with his perpetual project, the simple companionship of Rex. This glittering assemblage of power and influence seemed to belong to another reality altogether. Rex pressed against his leg, the dog's steady presence, a reminder that regardless of surroundings, some things remain constant. Sam drew strength from that contact, straightening his shoulders as Cooper guided him into the gathering. They had barely crossed the threshold when Chief Martinez intercepted them, his manner transformed from the dismissive arrogance of the morning. "Sergeant Harrison," he said, extending his hand. "Liberty Lady performed perfectly. The pilot said she flew better than any Huey they've handled." Sam accepted the handshake, noting the genuine respect that had replaced the chief's earlier condescension. "Glad to hear it. She always was reliable once you understood her quirks." Martinez nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what you showed us today. The bypass system, your inspection techniques. There's so much I never considered about these older aircraft." "They have their own language," Sam replied. "Different from the newer birds. Takes time to learn it." "I'd like to learn," Martinez said, the admission clearly costing him some pride. "If you're willing to teach." Before Sam could respond, they were joined by Lieutenant Blackwell, whose stiff military bearings seemed softened by a new humility. "Sergeant Harrison," he began, his voice low and sincere, "I want to formally apologize for my behavior this morning. It was unprofessional and disrespectful. There's no excuse for how I treated you." Sam studied the young officer, seeing beyond the rehearsed words to the genuine remorse beneath. "Already forgotten, Lieutenant," he said, offering his hand. Blackwell's relief was palpable as he accepted the handshake. Thank you, sir. And if I may say so, what you showed us today was eye-opening. I've spent my entire career believing that technology had all the answers. Technology's a tool, Sam said. A good one, but it's still just a tool. The real knowledge is here. He tapped his temple, and here his hand moved to his heart. Can't program that into a computer. The wisdom of the statement hung between them, bridging the generational divide that had seemed so vast just hours earlier. In that moment, something shifted, a recognition on both sides that each had something valuable to offer the other. Their exchange was interrupted by General Davidson's approach. With him was a distinguished man in his 60s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his bearing suggesting significant authority. Sergeant Harrison, Davidson said, "Allow me to introduce Secretary Wilson, Secretary of the Air Force." "Secretary, this is Sergeant First Class Samuel Harrison, the ghost I was telling you about." The secretary extended his hand, his grip firm and confident. "Sergeant Harrison, it's an honor. I understand we have you to thank for saving today's demonstration." Sam accepted the handshake with dignified modesty. "Just a simple adjustment, sir. Liberty Lady did all the real work." Wilson smiled, a politician's practiced expression softened by what seemed genuine interest. "General Davidson tells me you have a unique history with that helicopter, that you saved his life once upon a time." "The general gives me too much credit," Sam demurred. "I was just doing my job." "Your job included running into enemy fire to extract wounded personnel," Wilson countered, clearly having been briefed on Sam's service record. "That goes well beyond routine maintenance, Sergeant." Sam's discomfort with praise was evident, but he managed a polite nod. "It's what any of us would have done in the moment, sir." Davidson intervened, sensing Sam's unease. "Ghost has always been modest about his contributions, Mr. Secretary. But what happened today illustrates a larger point I've been trying to make about our maintenance training programs." Wilson turned his attention to the general, allowing Sam a momentary reprieve from the spotlight. "You mentioned this generational bridge concept. I'd like to hear more." As Davidson outlined his proposal for a program pairing experienced veterans with young technicians, Sam found his gaze drawn to Liberty Lady, visible through the open hangar doors. The helicopter sat silhouetted against the deepening twilight, her distinctive profile a shadow from another era. The sight triggered another cascade of memories, not of combat this time, but of quieter moments. Hours spent meticulously maintaining her systems. Nights sleeping beneath her protective bulk when accommodations were scarce. The particular vibration of her frame that he could feel through the soles of his boots, telling him everything he needed to know about her mechanical health. He had known that helicopter more intimately than many people knew their spouses, had trusted his life to her countless times, and she had never failed him when it mattered most. Cooper's voice drew him back to the present. "Sir, the secretary asked you a question." Sam blinked, refocusing on the conversation. "I apologize, sir, my mind was elsewhere." Wilson repeated his query. "I asked if you would consider serving as the inaugural mentor for this program. General Davidson speaks very highly of your abilities, and today's events seem to validate his assessment." The directness of the question caught Sam off guard. He had assumed Davidson's proposal was conceptual, something to be developed over months of planning and bureaucratic review. The secretary's involvement suggested a far more immediate timeline. "I'm flattered by the offer, sir," Sam said carefully, "but I've been retired a long time. Not sure how much use I'd be in today's Air Force." "Today suggests otherwise," Wilson replied. "From what I understand, none of our current technicians could diagnose the issue with Liberty Lady, despite all their training and equipment. Yet you solved it in minutes based on experience and intuition that no manual could provide." Sam glanced at Davidson, whose expression revealed that this conversation was not entirely spontaneous. The general had clearly been advocating for him behind the scenes. "The program would be structured on your terms, Sergeant," Wilson continued. "Part-time consulting if you prefer. Perhaps starting here at Eagle Crest, working with Chief Martinez and his team, teaching them not just the technical aspects, but the intangibles, the instincts that can't be codified in training materials." The proposal was tempting in ways Sam hadn't anticipated. For years, he had lived with the quiet resignation that his skills were obsolete, his knowledge irrelevant in the age of digital diagnostics and automated troubleshooting. Today had challenged that assumption, suggesting there might still be value in the hard-earned wisdom of an old crew chief. Moreover, there was something appealing about the idea of legacy, of passing on what he knew before it was lost forever, of ensuring that the next generation of maintainers understood not just the how, but the why of aircraft maintenance, the philosophy that had guided his hands through decades of service. "Would need to think about it, sir," he said finally. "Discuss details." Wilson nodded, respecting the measured response. "Of course. No need to decide tonight. General Davidson can provide the particulars when you are ready." He extended his hand once more. "Whatever you decide, Sergeant, I want to thank you for your service, both the years you gave in uniform and what you contributed today." As the secretary moved on to greet other guests, Davidson lingered, a knowing look in his eyes. "No pressure, Ghost. But for what it's worth, I think you'd make a difference. These young technicians, they're smart, dedicated, but they're missing something only experience can provide." Sam nodded, acknowledging the truth in the statement. Before he could respond, his attention was drawn to a commotion near the hangar entrance. A group of aging men had arrived, their civilian attire contrasting with the military uniforms surrounding them. They moved with the slightly stiff gait of those whose bodies had endured more than time alone would account for. Several wore caps or jackets bearing unit insignia from conflicts long past. "Veterans group from Phoenix," Davidson explained, following Sam's gaze. "I invited them specially for tonight. Many served in the same campaigns you did." The veterans were being greeted and guided toward the reception area, their weathered faces lighting up at the sight of Liberty Lady through the open hangar doors. One man in particular, leaning on a cane, but still standing straight-backed and proud, stopped in his tracks when he caught sight of Sam. For a moment, the two men stared at each other across the crowded hangar, recognition dawning slowly across features altered by the passage of decades. "Is that—" the man said, his voice carrying in a momentary lull in the ambient conversation. "My God, it can't be. Ghost Harrison." Sam's expression shifted, memory aligning with the present moment. "Carson." The man's face broke into a broad smile. "It is you I told my wife it might be when I heard the story on the news. The ghost raising Liberty Lady from the dead one more time." He made his way through the crowd, moving with the determination of a man who would not be deterred by mere physical limitation. When he reached Sam, he extended his hand, then seemed to think better of it and pulled the older man into a firm embrace. 20 years, he said, stepping back to study Sam's face. 20 years, and you haven't changed a bit, you old devil." Sam's customary reserve melted slightly in the warmth of genuine reunion. "You've gone gray, Carson. Suits you." Carson laughed, running a hand through his silver hair. "Retirement will do that to you? Been out 10 years now. Flying corporate jets for a while, then decided I'd had enough of the sky." His gaze moved to Rex, sitting attentively at Sam's side. "And who's this fine fellow?" "Rex," Sam said simply. "My partner these days." Carson knelt, offering his hand for the shepherd to sniff. Rex considered the gesture, then gave the hand a gentle lick, apparently approving of this connection to Sam's past. "Still good with all species, I see," Carson said, straightening. "You always did have a way with the four-legged crew members." He turned to Davidson, offering a respectful nod. "General, thank you for the invitation. When I heard Liberty Lady would be flying today, I couldn't miss it. Never thought I'd see her in the air again, much less with Ghost here to welcome her home." "It's been a day of reunions," Davidson replied, "and revelations for some of our younger personnel." Carson nodded, understanding the implication. "Heard there was some trouble with the old girl this morning. Should have known it would take the Ghost to sort it out." He turned back to Sam. "What was it? Fuel system?" "Bypass valve," Sam confirmed. "The one we installed outside Basra." "Ah." Carson's expression took on a distant quality, memory transporting him back to that time and place. "The modification that saved our bacon more than once. I remember when you first showed it to me, said it wasn't in any manual, but would keep us flying when nothing else would." He shook his head, a mixture of admiration and nostalgia. "You were right as usual." The two veterans fell into conversation, their shared history creating a bubble of understanding in the midst of the formal reception. They spoke a language of their own, referencing missions and locations that existed now only in memory, and classified reports using the shorthand of men who had faced death together and emerged on the other side. Cooper watched from a respectful distance, fascinated by the easy camaraderie between the old pilot and the crew chief. Martinez and Blackwell joined him, their earlier arrogance replaced by genuine interest. They flew together, Martinez asked quietly. Cooper nodded. Sounds like it. In Iraq, maybe Afghanistan too. Different world, Blackwell observed, the things they must have seen. Their contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of more veterans drawn by the recognition and reunion playing out before them. One by one they approached Sam, each greeting him with the respect reserved for a man whose skills had directly contributed to their survival. Ghost. Remember that time outside Fallujah engine failure at 2,000 feet and you had us flying again in under an hour? Harrison, you old warhorse, still fixing things the rest of us can't figure out. My God, it really is you. You patched me up outside Mosul when the medic was overwhelmed. Never got to thank you properly. Each reunion brought forth a new facet of Sam's service history, revealing to the younger military personnel a portrait of a man whose contributions went far beyond his official duties as a crew chief. Here was someone who had not merely maintained aircraft, but had saved lives through ingenuity, courage, and an unyielding determination to bring everyone home. As the evening progressed, a spontaneous gathering formed around Sam's old comrades, sharing stories with the younger generation. The formal structure of the reception dissolved into something more organic and meaningful, a living history lesson with Liberty Lady as its centerpiece and Sam as its reluctant professor. General Davidson observed from a distance, a satisfied expression on his face. This was precisely what he had envisioned for the Generational Bridge program, the transmission of not just technical knowledge, but the ethos of service and sacrifice that defined the best of military tradition. Sam, for his part, found himself drawn out of his customary reticence by the warmth of reunion and the genuine interest of the younger personnel. He answered questions, clarified technical points, and occasionally corrected exaggerated accounts of his exploits with gentle humor. It wasn't quite that dramatic, he would say, a hint of a smile softening his weathered features. Carson here always did have a talent for embellishment. The old pilot would laugh, conceding the point but insisting on the essential truth of his narrative. Maybe I add a little color, but the facts stand. You kept us flying when no one else could have. As the evening wore on, the crowd around Sam gradually thinned, veterans departing with handshakes and promises to stay in touch, younger personnel returning to their duties with new perspectives on the heritage they had inherited. Eventually, only a core group remained: Sam, Rex, Carson, Cooper, Martinez, Blackwell, and General Davidson. They had migrated to a quiet corner of the hangar where the formality of the reception gave way to more candid conversation. What I still don't understand, Martinez said, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity, is why your bypass system was never documented. Something that effective should have been incorporated into the official maintenance procedures. Sam and Carson exchanged a glance, a silent communication born of shared experience. Military bureaucracy, Carson offered. By the time Ghost perfected the modification, the brass was already looking toward the next generation of helicopters. They weren't interested in upgrades for airframes they planned to phase out. Sam nodded. Submitted the design through proper channels. Got lost in the system. After a while, I stopped trying. Just kept installing it myself on birds I was responsible for. How many lives do you think it saved? Blackwell asked quietly. Sam shrugged, uncomfortable with the implication of heroism. Can't say. Wasn't keeping count. I can, Carson interjected. At least 50 just in our unit. Probably hundreds across all theaters where Ghost installed his modification. The numbers hung in the air, a stark reminder of the real-world impact of Sam's unheralded innovation. For the younger personnel, it was a sobering realization that behind the technical specifications and maintenance protocols, lay the fundamental reality of lives preserved or lost based on the skills of men like Harrison. And that's exactly why we need this program, Davidson said, bringing the conversation back to his proposal. Some knowledge can't be captured in technical manuals or diagnostic systems. It has to be transmitted directly from those who've lived it to those who will carry on the tradition. He looked at Martinez and Blackwell. Would you two be interested in being part of the pilot program? Working directly with Sergeant Harrison to document his techniques, his approaches to problem solving under pressure. The chief and lieutenant exchanged glances, then nodded in unison. It would be an honor, sir. Martinez said, his earlier skepticism completely evaporated. I've learned more today about these aircraft than in years of formal training. Blackwell concurred. I believe this could fundamentally change how we approach maintenance training, sir. Moving beyond the purely technical to incorporate the intuitive aspects that can't be codified. Davidson turned to Sam. Well, Ghost, what do you say? Ready to teach these youngsters a few of your secrets? Sam was silent for a long moment, his pale blue eyes moving from the earnest faces of the young technicians to Carson's encouraging smile to Rex's steadfast presence at his feet. Finally, his gaze settled on Liberty Lady visible through the hangar doors, her silhouette a dark shadow against the night sky. For years he had lived in quiet retirement, assuming his skills were obsolete, his knowledge rendered irrelevant by technological advancement. Today had challenged that assumption, suggesting there might still be a role for the hard-earned wisdom of an old crew chief. Moreover, there was something deeply appealing about the idea of legacy, of passing on what he knew before it was lost forever, of ensuring that the next generation understood not just the how, but the why of what they did, the philosophy that had guided his hands through decades of service. Could work part-time, he said finally. Couple days a week, would need to bring Rex. Davidson smiled, recognizing the conditional acceptance for what it was. Of course, Rex is part of the package. We'll set up everything according to your preferences. And housing, Cooper asked. Riverstone's a 2-hour drive from base. We'll arrange accommodations for the days you're here, Davidson assured Sam. Or if you prefer, we could look into something more permanent near the base. Sam shook his head. Riverstone's home, but temporary quarters for overnights would work. The details were quickly agreed upon: a consulting position, flexible schedule, focus on mentoring rather than formal instruction. Throughout the negotiations, Sam maintained his characteristic reserve, but those who looked closely might have detected a subtle shift in his demeanor, a renewed purpose in the set of his shoulders, a quiet satisfaction in the lines of his face. As the discussion concluded, Carson pulled Sam aside for a private word. This is good, Ghost, he said, his voice low and sincere. What you've learned. It shouldn't die with us. Too valuable. Sam nodded, acknowledging the truth in his old friend's words. Never thought of myself as a teacher. Carson laughed softly. You've always been teaching whether you knew it or not. Every time you showed a rookie how to troubleshoot under fire, every time you explained your modifications to a skeptical pilot. You were teaching then, and you'll be teaching now. Just with less gunfire involved. The observation carried the weight of shared history of mutual understanding that could only exist between men who had faced death together and emerged on the other side. As the evening drew to a close, General Davidson approached Sam one final time. We'll have the paperwork ready for you by the end of the week, Ghost. No rush to start. Take the time you need to prepare. Sam nodded, then glanced toward Liberty Lady, still visible on the darkened tarmac. Would like to see her again before I go. One last check. Davidson understood immediately. Of course, I'll have Cooper escort you out. The young airman stepped forward, honored by the assignment. Together, Sam, Cooper, and Rex made their way out of the hangar and across the tarmac to where Liberty Lady waited in the gentle darkness of the desert night. The helicopter stood silent and still, her day's work complete. In the soft illumination of the distant runway lights, she seemed to possess a presence beyond mere machinery, a dignity earned through service, through the lives she had carried, and the mission she had completed. Sam approached her slowly, his movements deliberate, respectful. Rex padded alongside, alert but calm, sensing the importance of the moment to his master. Cooper hung back instinctively, understanding that this was a private reunion. Sam laid his hand on Liberty Lady's fuselage, feeling the cool metal beneath his palm. His touch was gentle, almost tender, like a man greeting an old friend after a long separation. She's quite something, isn't she? Cooper said softly, breaking the silence. Sam nodded, his gaze moving over the helicopter's familiar lines. Been through a lot together, this old girl and me. Desert storms, enemy fire, mechanical failures, you wouldn't believe. His voice held a note of quiet pride. Never left anyone behind. Not once. Cooper watched the old sergeant commune with the machine, struck by the depth of connection between man and aircraft. It was something beyond his experience, a relationship forged in circumstances he could scarcely imagine. Will you tell us those stories, he asked. When you come back as part of the program, Sam's weathered face creased in a small, thoughtful smile. Some of them, the ones that matter, the ones with lessons worth learning. He completed his circuit of the helicopter, his hand trailing along her skin in a farewell caress. Then he turned to Cooper, his expression reflecting a decision fully embraced. Might need your help setting up the program, figuring out what these young technicians need to know most. Cooper straightened, honored by the trust implied in the statement. I'd be proud to help, sir. Whatever you need. Sam nodded, satisfied. With a final glance at Liberty Lady, he turned toward the base, Rex falling into step beside him. Cooper followed, sensing he was witnessing the beginning of something significant. A bridge between generations, a transmission of knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. As they walked, the night air cool and crisp around them, Sam felt a weight lifting, not the burden of the past which he would always carry, but the weight of purpose unfulfilled. For years he had lived with the quiet resignation that his skills were obsolete, his knowledge irrelevant in the age of digital diagnostics and automated troubleshooting. Today had proven otherwise. There was still value in the hard-earned wisdom of an old crew chief. Still lives to be saved, if not directly by his hands, then through the hands of those he would teach. Still a role to play in the continuing story of American military aviation. The ghost would return not to haunt, but to guide. And in that guidance lay a form of immortality more meaningful than any medal or commendation. 1 month later, a small ceremony was held in Hangar 7 at Fort Eagle Crest. Without fanfare or publicity, but with quiet dignity, Sergeant First Class Samuel Ghost Harrison was officially appointed as the first mentor in the newly established Generational Bridge Program. General Davidson presided, keeping his remarks brief but heartfelt. Chief Martinez and Lieutenant Blackwell stood at attention, their earlier arrogance replaced by genuine respect. Airman Cooper served as escort, his pride evident in every aspect of his bearing. And behind them, visible through the open hangar doors, Liberty Lady sat on the tarmac, her presence a testament to the enduring value of experience, of intuition, of the human element in an increasingly technological world. As Sam accepted the simple certificate marking his new role, Rex sitting faithfully at his side, he felt a sense of completion, not an ending, but a continuation. A passing of knowledge from one generation to the next, ensuring that the lessons he had learned at such cost would not be lost to time. In the days and weeks that followed, he would begin the work of transmission, teaching young technicians not just the technical aspects of aircraft maintenance, but the philosophy that had guided his hands through decades of service. The intuition that told him when something wasn't right, the improvisation that saved lives when standard procedures fell short, the deep connection to the machines that carried men into danger, and if he did his job right, brought them home again. It was not the retirement he had envisioned alone in his small house in Riverstone, with only Rex and his memories for company. It was something better, a purpose that honored his past while securing the future, a role that valued precisely those qualities that had defined his service. The Ghost had found his final mission. And like all the missions before it, he would execute it with quiet excellence, with unfailing dedication, with the understated heroism that had always been his hallmark. For Samuel Harrison, Crew Chief, Silver Star recipient, the man they called Ghost, the circle was complete. Liberty Lady flew again, carrying not just her crew, but the weight of history, the echoes of battles fought and lives saved. And Sam himself had found a new purpose in the twilight of his years, ensuring that the knowledge he had gained at such cost would survive to serve another generation. As he walked across the tarmac toward a group of young technicians eager for their first lesson, Rex padding faithfully alongside, he felt a sense of rightness, of belonging. The past was honored, the future secured, and in between stood a man who had lived his life in service to others, asking nothing in return but the satisfaction of knowing he had done his duty well. The desert sun shone down on Fort Eagle Crest, illuminating the present moment while casting shadows that connected it to the past. In that interplay of light and darkness, of memory and possibility, Sam Harrison found his peace. Not in forgetting, but in ensuring that what he remembered would never be truly lost. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all.